Hello, and welcome to the North South podcast. I'm not actually sure what episode this is because we're fucking useless at this. Episode 4, according to my co-host Dave. And I've introduced Dave already. Obviously, we are joined today by Ed Ingamels. Ed is a black belt. I apologise, Ed. I don't know what degree black belt you are.
Technically, the beginning of this month was my 9th year, so 3rd degree, but no one's put the stripe on yet.
Oh, nice. Nice. There you go. So Ed's 3rd degree black belt. You are again, forgive me if I got this incorrect, you are a qualified psychologist with a master's degree in neuroscience, is that correct?
Yeah, registered with the BPS and master's in cognitive neuroscience. Yeah.
Perfect. And obviously alongside that, obviously Ed is a big sort of advocate of skill acquisition, coaching development in Jiu Jitsu. I have someone's shouting at the door. We've got to deliver it. Ed was again from a self perspective, when I first started delving into this, just sort of post COVID. Ed was one of the first people I reached out and spoke to, and obviously Dave will collaborate with how rare it is for me to do that. I don't normally talk to many people on social media, But yeah, so obviously Ed's someone that myself and Dave have wanted to get on and have a chat to, because I think he you epitomise a lot of the stuff that we think about from a coaching perspective in terms of pragmatism and understanding the room and all these different things that go into it aside from just sort of literature and theory. So welcome, Ed.
Thank you for having me. Where do you want to start?
What we actually thought was we try and keep a theme with like guests. We want it to be more of a discussion, really. We don't want it to just be a chance. And obviously, you're not really like this if anyone's listened to your podcast before, but it's not a chance to just plug you. We want your opinions, we want your thoughts, and we want people to be able to vibe with it. And we thought, what's the most clickbaity title we could use? And I think we thought what we're going to go with is everything that's wrong with ecological dynamics, because that'll just get everyone really riled up.
Yeah, because they're not already. Because
they're not already. And obviously we needed to make sure that we had somebody who has got a good backing of evidence and understanding of the literature. We couldn't just be an absolute nobody who just comes on and goes, well, I think drilling's better because that's all I've done for the past 20 years. So that's the topic we're going to go with. So that's a good place to start, Ed. So what is wrong with ecological dynamics? What is everything that's wrong with it?
It's a big question. I mean, at the moment, obviously you started kind of playing around with this quite a while ago when it was kind of relatively inaccessible and it was just
I like to call it the pre-Sounders era. So it's like 2000 thing PS.
Yeah, that's quite good. That again, that'll trigger him. That's a good start. Yeah, I mean, it's like, as I say, it used to be a case of like you had to do quite a lot of work and you had to read stuff, and as I say, it's become more accessible, which is good and bad, because again, that accessibility isn't necessarily to good information, and a lot of it is accessibility to one or two kind of people's interpretation of the literature and things. And as I say, at the moment, it's a bit of a fucking mess. And I think probably majority of gyms in the UK now are kind of playing about with it. There's a lot of them that are throwing around kind of buzzwords and acronyms and like CLA shit and all that. And they're probably not doing like a CLA approach particularly strictly. It's probably just kind of playing around with it and stuff. And I think if you do it strictly, it is a very specific way of doing things. And I literally don't use kind of terms anymore. I'm not saying I'm eco, I'm not saying I'm doing CLA, and I'm kind of guided by, an ecological framework. But even then, I'm still kind of very much unsure about certain aspects, especially when it comes to things like memory. Last podcast I did, I kind of mentioned that, and I think this is something that needs to be kind of addressed a little bit more. I think the problem is as well that it's not fully understood kind of in the literature at the moment anyway. It's a talking point. It's how to kind of integrate or kind of find a way of accepting memory into kind of an ecological dynamics approach. What are at the moment? Let's. So you, Andy, you're running like a. Would you call yourself an eco approach? Would you say it's CLA approach? What would you pigeonhole yourself as?
It's very similar to yourself. We as a gym have gone to great lengths to not categorize ourselves as anything. A couple of reasons for that. First and foremost, one of the primary reasons is I don't want to get pigeonholed into this idea of like, you're an eco guy. I think whilst I'm obviously like our gym is based around the constraint-led approach. Like we very rarely drill anything. Like we don't do any of that sort of stuff that you would see in a constraint-led approach-based gym. But there's a couple of reasons for it. A, because obviously coming my educational background, professional background, and my coaching background, I'm obviously aware of the different variations of coaching and the impact that different things have on someone's ability to navigate and learn skilled behavior. And the way I view it as a coach in the gym is we use what sort of fits best within the framework of what's going to allow somebody to be the best grappler they can be. Obviously, what is backed up to some extent via evidence. Obviously, there is evidence for internal processing models and all that different stuff, but what seems to be more emergent and so I wouldn't necessarily, whilst we are a gym that is pretty much entirely constraint led, I would not pigeonhole myself into that perspective, because I'm a believer that if something came along that was more that seemed better, that better suited the sport, suited better the way that we approach practice and skilled learning, it wouldn't even cross my mind to go, right, let's try and move towards this in different directions, even if it was just starting to experiment with it, play with it, whatever it is. Because again, the obviously my foundation in this was all from obviously I've done a lot of the reading now, but it was all rooted in like, well, how can I get a group of people the most amount of return, for want of a better term, without making it, whilst being able to recognize individual differences, and again, obviously that fit into the constraint model, but like I was aware enough to go, well, we've got all these different people in this room. He's 6'2", he's 5'5", he's 100 kilos, he's 50 kilos. Like the model doesn't suit. So how can I sort of create an environment where people are being exposed to skills, exposed to information, and picking up on that information? And obviously that's where the constraint model fit really, really well. So I wouldn't, again, that was a long-winded answer, but no, I wouldn't class myself as anything.
No.
I just consider myself a coach.
Yeah, I think, again, it's a good answer. I think at the minute, so like what you said about, again, if you find something that kind of works, you're more than happy to kind of try it in the room. I think this is, again, one of the issues with the kind of eco approach and stuff at the minute. People have kind of decided to go down that route, and then as with kind of, I think anything like the old approach was very kind of blinkered, and you weren't prepared to kind of look outside the lines with it. And I feel that is kind of the direction that the kind of ecological, CLA-based approach is going down at the minute. People have decided they're going to do it, and then they become blinkered to everything else. And it has to be eco, it has to be this, has to be that. And again, the key thing is, again, it's a theory, it's an idea, it's not a perfect model, it's a current model. And there are other kind of competing models, and there is this crossover between like ecological psychology and cognitive psychology is, there is a crossover where people are starting to look into it and seeing how to potentially merge some things, but there are some kind of elements that are very, contradicted to each other, so that it's never going to fully merge. But as I say, I think people they kind of jump on this bandwagon and they see this as like kind of a silver bullet or like a panacea, and it's going to be the perfect way to run the room. And again, anyone who has any idea about how this works is it's going to, the way you kind of apply it, it's going to be different in every room anyway. And I think the real issue is coming down to this. Everyone goes on about, it's not plug and play, but then everyone just kind of copies everyone else's like games, or I hate the term games, but like, I mean, it's probably the best way of describing it. They're just kind of copying the games that have emerged from other rooms, and they are kind of specific games that have emerged from the people and the environment of that room. And then people will be saying we don't do plug and play, but then they're literally just copying everybody's games. And like, I think when it comes to that, I think you can have a very general framework of games based around most of the positions and transitions within Jiu Jitsu, but it's always going to be a starting point, and how that kind of emerges in the room, or games emerge from that in the room, is a lot of people aren't prepared to do that. They just want to stick rigidly to like a framework of set games, which is, if you assumed everybody was the same and there was no variability between athletes, no variability within the environment, that would be great. But that's we all know that's not kind of the case. So it's people jumping on board with this, and I say jumping on board. I'm not criticizing people for going down the eco route and stuff, because it shows they're prepared to kind of look at other ways of doing this. But it's a misunderstanding of how the approach is kind of applied, and the work the coach actually has to put in within the room at that time, kind of changing things and observing the room and seeing what's happening, what potentially could be happening or isn't happening, and then you're changing the games depending on that. And as I say, from what I see, I feel a lot of people are saying that they're doing this, but then from what I'm seeing being posted, it doesn't look that way. It looks like it is becoming kind of plug and play, and this is the correct framework. I mean, the correct framework for what fucking environment? Like, it's, there's you could split environments very, very generally into like kind of a hobbyist environment or a competitive environment or like a combined environment. Like, so they're going to have different approaches to it. Like, they're going to have different types of games to kind of work with, and then within those environments, it's going to be very different depending on who's on the mat, what's the level of person on the mat, who are the people on the mat. And then you get into like motivation and kind of personalities and all this kind of stuff. So that, for me, that's the biggest kind of pitfall at the moment. And I don't know whether that's down to laziness, whether that's down to misunderstanding, but it does seem to be that way. I mean, DVDs being released of kind of games and things, I'm not a big fan of, and I know other people weren't a big fan of, but they've kind of done it. Not to name anybody, but I haven't looked at stuff like that yet. I mean, I've been, as I say, I've been away I kind of dropped off the scene because I was just losing my mind, and I just couldn't deal with it anymore. And now I've come back and it's in a worse state. So it's like, I'm a little bit kind of apprehensive about the direction it's kind of going. So, but as I say, it's this blinkered approach now, and it's the same as before, but it's just in a different direction. And it's that they're not being prepared to look outside a very narrow scope of literature and a very narrow scope of an approach you're using. As I say, if the theory was like bulletproof and it was fully proven and there was no holes in it, and it was completely, without any doubt, it was the correct way, then okay. Even then, I'd probably still read around. But as I say, at the moment, it is a very kind of specific kind of theory that it does have some kind of issues, and it doesn't answer for a lot of the questions that are kind of put to it. As I say, what do you find with your training? You said you don't drill. This is another thing that's quite interesting. So would you, if you were looking at getting someone, for instance, if you were looking at like reverse De La Riva, for instance, and you were looking at trying to get somebody kind of going to the inside, kind of inverting to the inside, to get the hips underneath, would you get them kind of just playing around with that movement for 2 or 3 minutes, or would that also be no chance because it's drilling?
No. So it's a good question. Obviously, again, depending on the more, I don't like using this terminology, but what I mean, what I was going to say is depending on the more complexity of the movement, and what I mean by complexity is not necessarily that it's a complex movement, it's more I guess the novelty of the movement is probably a better way of putting it.
Or like an unnatural movement that they may not have encountered.
Yeah.
This brings us on to like donor sports like gymnastics and various things as well. So this
is so in more we'll use the word novel, more novel situations that
absolutely.
In that situation then absolutely we would give them opportunity to explore it. It's the same with our like foundations classes. If they're learning a submission for the first time, so like I don't know, a rear naked choke or an arm bar or a straight footlock, we will say to them, obviously we'll give them the position, we'll explore everything around it, the connection point, the getting to the position, all that different stuff. But for the first time they finish it, we might just go, right, just grab your partner, just have a couple of goes with no resistance. Do you know what I mean? Just, you're not doing like, we're not spending 45 minutes. It's just like, this is the finish, just so they've got a bit of context to it. It's not that I don't believe you couldn't achieve it without drilling it, but it's making decisions in that moment of like, right, we've got a room full of people that have been at fucking work all day, and at the end of the day, they just want to come home from a session and go, I've actually accomplished something. They've done everything else is live. They've done 50 minutes of live work, but 2 of those minutes is just, right, I'm on an armbar, can I just extend it and get a feel for it for the first time I ever do it? Do you know what I mean? Because I'm not, again, this idea of pragmatism and dogmatism, I'm not dogmatic enough to think, well, in that situation, they've got all the contextual information. They've got it all. And they're going to go and practice getting a finish against a resisting opponent. But for the first time they ever do something, I just want it to be, oh, this is what it feels like. And like you said, in more novel situations, it might be you just give them context and let them start in it. They're not doing full like fucking Kiss of the Dragon back takes. But it's like, this is what a reverse de la Riva is. What is reverse de la Riva? Yeah. Well, it's an inside hook, whatever it is. This is where we're going to work from. But you've got that bit of context of what this looks like. Like, single leg X is always one. I think, like, if you've never seen single leg X before, the first time you show somebody, nobody does it right the first time.
No, because it's not a movement. It's not a movement that people would have naturally encountered in another sport, really. So, but again, we know that these kind of positions are going to be used, and they do have a function, which is kind of the key thing. It's understanding what the function of a reverse de la Riva would be. I mean, obviously the function of all guards is to kind of create off balance or instability in order to enter the positions or come to the top. But we kind of know that these positions have emerged over time anyway for a certain function. So I don't think there's any problem with starting people kind of in that. And with I was doing it this week or last week. Like, there was a lot of people that hadn't really encountered the kind of inversion stuff. So I was getting all I was getting them to do was start in a reverse de la Riva, and the objective was to try and roll to the inside, and then just trying to get their hips under their opponent's hips. And then once they get comfortable with that movement, like dead drilling that after 2 or 3 minutes, when they kind of feel familiar with the movement, that kind of becomes redundant or even kind of counterproductive in some ways. And then obviously that's when you can start to get them to explore the position and stuff. But I still think a lot of people are kind of avoiding anything like that. And they're saying, "Oh no, you can't drill, you can't do it." It's like, well, you absolutely can, but it's how you get them drilling it as well. So if I'm getting someone drilling, if I was getting someone to drill like an armbar or something, and because they'd never done an armbar before or whatever, okay, I would be pretty vague, and it would be kind of focusing on just a few kind of points that are relatively consistent across most armbars. I wouldn't be talking about specific grips or anything like that. So anything I would show directly would be relatively vague, and it would be based around 1 or 2 like mechanical kind of reference points or concepts from there. But I'd still like someone to have chance to explore that movement without kind of resistance to start with, just to kind of get them going. And then obviously after that, you're going to add resistance in, and you're going to kind of constrain certain things to, push attention in certain directions.
It's something that I was, and again, when I should caveat this, I'm absolutely not comparing people to dogs before we start this.
But I'm excited about this now. Off you go.
But so obviously, a lot of dog training is all based on behaviorism. It's positive and negative reinforcement. But there's a thing with when you're training dogs is the dog has to understand the behavior that it's expected to do to get positive or negative reinforcement. If you tell a dog to sit and it doesn't know what sit is, it doesn't matter. And in a similar way to when you've got a novel, and again, fucking, I'm probably going to get battered by somebody who listens to this who's a bit more understanding of it. But in the same way with people, if what we're trying to give them is that this is what this is. Do you know what I mean? Like we're not saying you need to do it over and over and over and over again. Yeah. We're just giving you the context of the thing that we're talking about. This is what it is,
well,
and then they can go and explore.
Intention, yeah. That's the intention, really, isn't it? You're setting that intention, but if you don't understand what the kind of the goal or the intention is, I think you have to kind of make people aware of what that goal and what that intention is, even in a very kind of vague way. I think when you set those intentions and they have to be very, very specific about how you're going to do it, that's when I think you start to go more towards like the technique-based stuff. So the intentions have to be relatively vague, but there has to be a specific kind of outcome at the end that they're looking to go towards, and then all the kind of stuff that happens in between that. That's and then obviously if there's certain things that are not kind of seeing, it's then tweaking the game or tweaking the training drill to kind of draw attention to certain areas where there's information that's going to help them achieve that outcome or intention.
No, I agree, and I think, like you said, it's and again, this is where there's like that. There's always that. In strength conditioning, we call it like the "it depends" question. It's like if you've got a question, the answer is always "it depends," because there is absolutely, you can absolutely see these emergent behaviours without drilling anything, and you can absolutely see them through drilling everything to the absolute max. And I guess from a coaching perspective, is me and Dave have spoken about this in the past, but you're always trying to, as a coach, always trying to make a decision relative to what is best suited in that moment that's going to allow somebody to then go and take that information and apply it in a real manner. And yes, you could, if you are an eco purist or a constraint-led purist, you could say, well, we could spend an hour and by the end of it, we'll start to see some emergent behaviour with an armbar. But you can also say, well, if we just let them have a go for 2 minutes, they have that context, and now they can. The session can be so much more productive because they've just had that small piece of information, especially when it's more specifying information. Obviously, if you're talking about a guard pass, the sort of global problems that somebody's going to experience in a guard pass, there's so much of that, like it becomes that like, well, what if they do this? What if they do this? What if they do this? With things that are lower variability, like an armbar extension for a straight armbar finish, obviously the lower the variability, the more opportunity you have to go, right, we'll connect one side and like extend it. Do you know what I mean? Like, and
well, that's it. There are, like, as you start to kind of control the person more and get to certain positions, there is going to be less kind of variability, less degrees of freedom. That's the thing. So there are going to be less potential outcomes and solutions to problems. So I think when you get into more kind of control positions, you're more likely to be able to understand what's going to happen. Whereas again, the less connection you have and the more open it is, the more kind of things that can happen. I think the key thing is as well, when you actually kind of show something or you get them drilling something, as it were, it's understanding that how you get them to do it and how you present it to them, you need to be as kind of, again, it's this idea of being quite vague with it. Not so vague that they don't do anything that's even remotely close to it. But the more specific it is and the more kind of detail you use with it, the more you're constraining and narrowing down their kind of potential solutions they'll find. So it's just being kind of aware that when you're getting them to do something kind of with a non-resisting opponent, you're not making it so constrained and so specific that when the position goes live, their attention is going to be on a very, very narrow aspect of this. And then it's going to be hard to pull them away from that if you've kind of gone, oh, well, this is how you need to do it. I think that's a big thing as well. It's that information you're giving people. You have to be sure that any kind of information, instruction, kind of details you're giving people, you need to be aware of how much it's going to kind of constrain their ability to find other solutions linked around it, and how much you're kind of pushing them down a very narrow path that only has kind of one or two solutions. As I say, I think it's important, and I think these are things I don't think people think about, because again, they're just thinking about doing these games and basically plug and play kind of things. They're not thinking about how, you know, if they do give information, if they do if there is kind of some kind of an intervention from the coach, it's what is that information going to do to the athlete? Is it going to overly constrain them? Is it going to not constrain them enough so you know that their attention isn't necessarily focused where it needs to be? Yeah, that's as I say, I think that's a bit of an issue with. Again, it comes down to the lack of understanding of how the approach works, and people just kind of like falling back on this kind of very structured framework of set games that you need to use in your gym.
And yeah, I'd agree. I think. Sorry, Dave, you've not managed to fucking get an word in
It's like just please jump in.
My pay grade.
I think and one of the things that I think we've spoken about this before, and Ed and me and Dave definitely spoken about this before, is one of the problems again, the thing I find so ironic about all this, and again, I'm not against having a session plan. I'm not against using other people's information. Sometimes you see the one I always use is like the Cal Jones landmine game, and when you see something like when you see something like that, you're like, that is such a good example of how to use this to get an emergent behaviour. Like, you almost don't have to overthink it, because you're like, well, that's done for me, so I can take that, and it's such a good example of it, and I can take that straight into the gym. But the difficulty with, again, everything we're trying to do is about being adaptable and using the information that's around you, that's provided to you by the room. And the unfortunate problem with more plug and play stuff, and again, I'm absolutely not saying that, like, if you do say you do 4 games in a session based on an individual topic, and you're building up variability, you're building up degrees of freedom, whatever it is to build complexity, there could be like a game that you've taken from the Instagram. Do you know what I mean? Like, you might be like, that fits really well in this session, I'm going to use that.
Yeah.
But the whole thing that we're trying to encourage is adaptability, not rigidity. And so many people are just going, here's the plan, we're doing this 4 things, and that's it. Don't matter what happens in the session. Yeah. And it's, again, it comes down to that lack of understanding in terms of, like you said, that people are just going, well, it's a game, so therefore it's ecological dynamics, therefore it's constraint-led approach.
Yeah.
That's all that matters. And again, part of that is being able to admit that you've fucked it up, like, that you've got it wrong, like, and you've had an absolute fucking howler, or you've planned something in your head, you're going, this is going to be fucking mint, this. I think everyone's going to smash this. And then they do it, and you're just like, oh, that has gone catastrophically wrong. Like, and understanding that coaching, I always say, like, I'm asking students to go and play and to fail and to try again. Why am I any different? How could I go into a session and be like, I know everything that I'm doing? It's like, I mess up a lot, like a really lot. And like, there's certain times when you go in, you go, fucking hell, that was shit, wasn't it? That seemed like a good idea at the time.
So it comes back to something that I've been going on about for so long, and people are still not kind of twigging onto it. It's like, as when you come into the room as the coach, you're training how to coach. You're learning how to coach. You're doing the same kind of thing as the athletes are trying to get better at Jiu Jitsu. You're trying to get better at how to coach and how to implement the sort of training. And that, I don't think that mindset is present with a lot of coaches. I don't think they're going into the room with the mindset, like a learning mindset, in the sense that what you're trying to do is improve your athletes, but at the same time you're learning how to coach, and you're trying to become better at coaching. So the whole thing is a learning experience for the athletes, in the sense that they're trying to get better at jiu-jitsu or grappling, but it's a learning experience for the coach, and they're trying to get better and constantly kind of push their ability to coach forwards. And that's a big issue with a lot of people, a lot of coaches. It's a lack of self-awareness. That it is you're going through a very similar process to the students, but the intention and your goals are obviously going to be different, and the outcomes are going to be different. But
it's always it's always an interesting thing. Like, like me, obviously like Josh, who I run the gym with. I mean, we've been best mates since year 4, so that helps a lot. But like, we've had this really interesting thing in opening the gym, in that you'll get so many questions of like, well, are you not going to get other people to teach and blah, 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 or whatever it is. Like, and it's so interesting when you have a conversation with people and it's like, well, no, but our role is to coach. That's why we're here. Obviously, it's a business and it needs to make money and all that sort of shit. But like, the fundamental thing that we are here to do is to coach people. And that doesn't mean that we fob sessions off to other people just because we want to have a kids class on. If we've not got the time, our role is to coach those sessions, and it's 99% unless something's happening that we know neither can make it. Or is Ed? We've lost Ed. Oh, he's back.
I'm still. You lost me. Yeah, I did this the other week. It was on Riverside as well, so I don't know whether my computer's just really shit and runs out of memory. So you may have 30 minutes until it runs out of memory again, maybe. So
no, yeah, it's all right, mate. Don't worry.
Go on. Sorry. Yeah.
And I was just saying, like, I don't know where you cut off then, but I was saying, like, we had this really interesting interaction since opening the gym where people will ask us questions like, "Oh, you're not going to get other people to run your sessions and stuff like that," and we're like, "Well, no, because our role is we want to coach. Our job is to coach the sessions. Yes, it's a business and we've got to make money and we've got to do all those things. And obviously there are certain times where we have got lives, unfortunately. So we can't make every session, but that's our job. Our job is to coach the sessions. It's not about us knowing more than another person. It's not about us being better than another person, because we're not, but our fundamental role is to coach. That's our job. And that means that we are, between the two of us, we're looking at there's 2 of us because it allows us to split the load a little bit. But like, it's always us two. It's nobody else. That's our job. It's not because we don't think anyone else isn't good. It's not because we don't want other people's opinions. It's just because it's our job to coach the sessions. And I think that's something that's lost in jiu-jitsu, especially with gym owners. It's like, I know obviously we're relatively new, so it's easy to stand on a high hill and talk about it. But like, you get so many gym owners, it's just like, we've got like 4 brown belts covering these sessions, and they've got blue belts teaching the kids sessions, and they teach 1-2 sessions a week, and it's like, you're not coaching. That's not being in the environment.
Yeah, and you're not. Yeah.
If you were to,
sorry, David.
That's all right.
I've just about to speak, and I was about to interrupt you.
But if you were to do that, then you'd have to train them up. Your part of your project would then become teaching them how to coach, so that they can then coach, and that's the bit that's. So I came to it, all of this from classroom teaching, and it's fucking hard. Like, having the confidence to step away from in teaching your lesson plan or your session plan or whatever you want to call it in grappling, to go, fuck, this isn't working. Or, one of the people I was very fortunate to learn under talked about, as you become more proficient as a teacher, you start to know when those windows open. So when a kid asks a question that could just derail the whole fucking thing. But do we look through the window or do we not? And like 2 weeks before exams, no, we don't look through the window. Shut up, do the revision, pass the exam. But at any other time, why not? Look, this will be more interesting. But it's still hard to have that. And I had people whose jobs it was to help me learn how to do that. And I think for a lot of people, why the plug and play can be so appealing, or why it can dominate when people are first starting, is because they haven't got, like, Andrew's got, you've got Josh that you can talk to. I'm very lucky. I message Andrew and I'm like, I fucked it. I don't know what I'm doing. And despite the fact that I've had 8 years of classroom teaching to fall back on, and then strength and conditioning coaching, but I thought of something there, Andrew, when you were talking about that people would be shocked if you ran a strength and conditioning gym and you just went, oh yeah, one of my clients is just going to take your session. What the fuck are you talking about? But so this kid who's pretty good and he's a blue belt, he's going to do this session now, and you're like, why?
But that it goes back to that. Within jiu-jitsu, there's that assumption that you hit that purple belt and you can coach. And like, people assume that they are just completely transferable skills, and it's like, no, you have to. Maybe at purple belt, you know enough about jiu-jitsu and how the game works that you can now start learning how to coach. But and like you're saying about that, the window, that's quite interesting as well. And like applying it to jiu-jitsu, it depends when that window gets open, whether you look through it and kind of go off on a tangent or not. dependent how close to competition you are.
Yeah.
It comes into like the periodisation and stuff as well. It's like, are we 2 weeks away from competition? What phase of periodisation are we in? Like, absolutely. Like, I might be really interested in it, and like normally, but it's like, I don't want you fucking about with anything different. You're about a week away from competition. Like, we need to be pretty strict with this. But then you take note of it, come back to it, and that question can then potentially influence the direction that you go in the future with this. And yeah, I think it's a good kind of it's a good example of it. But you do have to be like, there is a certain level of confidence and like comfort in how you teach, and knowing what your style of teaching is, to be able to just follow something random and step away from a very kind of easy structured framework that you can just follow. But it's getting to that point, and being able to accept that, okay, this didn't work very well, so we'll change this. And again, I'm always very open with my guys, and when I fuck stuff up and I don't think it works, I'll say that I fucked it up, I'll change it. If a white belt suggests something to me that I think's a good idea, fuck it, we'll try it. Yeah. And I'll be very, very open to that kind of dialogue as well, because say the old-fashioned way is a case of like the coach knows everything and they teach, everyone else listens, and there's no kind of co-design, there's no back and forth or dialogue between the students and coaches, and almost like it creates that kind of atmosphere where students are terrified to question the coach. And I think it's a very, very bad environment. And again, it's a coach that isn't prepared to kind of progress and learn, and they may feel they know everything. So I'd like to think it's less like that in jiu-jitsu now, but I can imagine there's still a lot of gyms that are very much kind of coach-centered as opposed to student-centered. Yeah. And as I say, most of the really good stuff I've kind of figured out, and I've kind of like implementing going forwards. It hasn't been like just me. It hasn't been like an echo chamber. It's because everyone's prepared to question me and say, okay, I think, well, this would work better, this is wrong. And it's been a huge collaborative process. I'm lucky enough now that I have a lot of high level guys in the room. We have a lot of black belts and brown belts, and as a coach, if I don't allow them to kind of show stuff and kind of implement stuff and come up with ideas and stuff, then I'm massively misusing the resources I have.
No, I agree. I think you actually just, funnily enough, this will make sense, because I'm going to open a window. It'll be one for you, Dave. You mentioned a word before there, Ed, that probably left myself and Dave nursing a semi, is periodisation. And this is a really interesting thing when it comes to skill acquisition. And
have I spoke to you about this? I'm sure.
We have had a talk about it. Yeah,
because it was an area that I'm really interested in this, and obviously your kind of background in strength and conditioning. I remember asking you about the strength and conditioning approach to this.
Yeah, so periodisation is something that, again, similar to skill, the narrative of periodisation is changing quite a lot, especially in the lens of like combat sports, but in all sports really, because the sort of old method of periodisation was sort of very high volumes, very broad, very general, and obviously if you build in intensity ramps and stuff like that, and obviously there still is an element of that from a fatigue management standpoint and all that different stuff, but in sports that we'd consider more concurrent, so there's not as much of a season, I guess in a way, but this is where it's changing, because in seasons it is concurrent because you're playing week in, week out. You don't have that ability to peak and trough and sure. and build. The view is much more of a consistent approach. So out of just pure interest, because you mentioned it, when you're, obviously for you, you've got some guys now that are competing really frequently and are competing at a really, really good level. When you're looking at, say, I don't know, call it 10 to 8 weeks away from a competition, how does your approach to a training room change based on that variant of time closer to an event?
This is the problem. This is the problem I've had with the periodization. It's, if I'm working individually with people, it's fine. If I'm working with a room full of people, and I've played about with trying to do like an overall periodization for the whole kind of club, and it doesn't work because people are competing at different times, and it's a fucking mess.
Yeah.
With someone, the way I would approach that as well. So if we're kind of 8 weeks out and I know somebody has a super fight or something like that, then I scout opponents, and I assume everyone does this. Maybe I'm wrong, but if it's one fight, I'll scout opponents and we'll look at specific things. I'm looking for areas that kind of disparity in skill where it's not necessarily my athlete's strongest area, but it's an area that there is a disparity in skill that my athlete's skill level is a lot higher than their skill. A lot of the time, things like leg locks and stuff, I can have a leg locker, but the other person's leg locks are really good, even though it's his strongest area. So we're looking for areas that we can kind of exploit with that, and then identify a few. It's a case of looking at whether they have the tools or they have the ability to kind of exploit those. So we could bring in, if I feel they need to kind of develop something, like 8 weeks out, we can start playing about with potentially new things, and try and get them, part of their game. That becomes part of their game. And then obviously the closer we get to it, the more kind of restricted I'll be with the training. It will be, in an ideal world as well, I would be able to bring in training partners that can mimic the style, that have a similar build. When I was working with Modestas Bukauskas, who's in the UFC now. I was working with him back kind of pre-pandemic and post-pandemic when he just got into the UFC. And it was me and one of my black belts, a guy I called Tom Reynolds. And we would scout the opponent. And then like for the 6 weeks up to the fight, whenever we did like grappling work with him, we had to basically try and mimic that person's style, which I found for me, it was great because I was doing shit I would never do. Like, I couldn't just go to my A game. I had to be the same grappler as that he was fighting. So in an ideal world, I'd be able to do that with people. And I will try and do that to a certain degree. I'll try and get people within the gym to work kind of a certain style if I know we're encountering it. But again, the closer we get to that, the fight, the less kind of you'll be playing about with different things, and it will be kind of getting really sharp at what we think is going to be the way of beating them. This is one that I wouldn't mind asking with you guys, because like the amount of people I get asking me about how much time do you take off before you compete, and I know it's a very, very kind of individual and variable thing. Like with your guys, if they're competing, how many days rest would you get them to have kind of before the competition, roughly? Or would that be so specific?
Go on, Dave. You can start, Dave.
To say it depends.
Yeah, it does depend.
Because I absolutely know that. So you know,
So
it's a rough.
Me, the rule of thumb that I suggest to my guys, whether they listen to me or not, is a different matter. I generally say if they're competing on Saturday, I'd like their last hard session to be Wednesday, maybe Thursday. If they're like
Good.
on that other end of the scale. If it's Sunday, then Thursday. And generally, I try and encourage them to be at the point where it's a little bit more than they're comfortable with it being. Not like days and days more, but the idea being that they're a bit excited, they want to get back on the mats, they're missing it. Like that. That's my thinking with it, because that was what worked for me. But equally, I've got clients where they'd much rather push it like later in the week, or they're happy to do some very technical stuff, or they've got a room that allows them to adjust or adapt and not just go all out. But my rule of thumb is like no hard sparring after a Wednesday or a Thursday, because it's just too high risk.
Yeah, that's
exactly what I do.
Yeah, that's what I say. I usually try and say, I'd say two days away from the mat completely. Within that, if you want to, like, I don't know, hop on a bike, get a bit of sweat on, go for a walk, that sort of stuff, that's completely fine, sort of within 48 hours. But I'd same as Dave, last heavy training session should be a Wednesday. That's like weights as well, like usually lift, whatever. If we're doing any weights, it might be like a bit of a pump up or whatever, but nothing too daft. That's more so if someone's traveling, like someone's going abroad and they just need to get moving. But yeah, I'd agree. Wednesday's the sort of ideally the last hard session, but again, depending on when the comp is. If it's a Sunday, like you said, Thursday. If it's a Saturday, Wednesday. And I think that, but like, yeah, that's, I mean, going off topic a little bit, but that a lot of it comes down to the maturity of the person in understanding that a day's training, it ain't going to make that much difference. Like, you're just driving fatigue. You're not going to get more skillful. You're just getting more and more tired. Like, you're meant to feel good going into competition. You're meant to feel fresh. You want your legs to work. Do you know what I mean? You shouldn't be tired and stiff and your hips all banged up. Like, and again, that just does come down to the maturity of a person, and like Dave said,
knowing your athlete as well. Knowing,
of course, just like
you
it's
have,
One of my young lads that I sponsor messaged me. He's had a few back-to-back competitions this month, and he messaged me last week and was like, "Yeah, I think I need to be strict about when my last training sessions are." I was like, "So you've not been strict with when?" And he was like, "No, I've been training hard on Friday with competitions on Saturday." I was like, "For fuck's sake!" And he's been fine. Like, he's won, but he's been annoyed with himself because none of them have been particularly good by his standards of what he wants to do. And that's an interesting one as well, because by other metrics, loads of people are telling him, "Oh, you've done really well. You competed, you won, you did all that." And I tried to say to him, like, despite almost sabotaging yourself, you still got the skill to win. Now let's try it with a rest day and see if it feels any better.
Yeah.
Because I said to him, equally, it might be that you find that that's too many days. You know, you might go too far in the opposite direction and take it on Wednesday, and actually you do need something to keep you going, even if it's like lower level or whatever. But,
and I think I was going to say, you can get away with it. No, you're right. I think obviously, depending on the frequency of the competition, dictates how much more they can get away with. Obviously, if they're just doing one competition a month or every 2 months, they've got so much more wiggle room. I always, whenever we've got two of the people that I work with that compete a lot, like one of them's Shane Curtis and the other is Libby Genge, and they'll have periods where they'll do they might do 4 comps in a month. And we sort of plan it out, and we sort of say, like, look, the priority for this is to be as good at the start as you are at the end. It's not being brilliant at the first comp and then being knackered at the fourth. They need to be equal, and that means that we're going to have to approach the training week in a different way, because everything is about recovering so that you can perform again. So that might be, if someone's got back to back, it might be, say they compete on Saturday, that might be like, right, you're going to have 2 days rest. You can train Tuesday, Wednesday. Thursday, you can do something light, and then Friday's rest again into the company. Just creating a bit of a program, because it's not like the difficulty with jiu-jitsu guys, obviously, as we all know, is they don't look at it as a performance thing. They look at it as, well, I normally train Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, so why would I not do anything different? Whereas reality is, if you look at, I don't know if you're a football player or a rugby player or any sport that plays week in, week out, the week is centered around game day.
Yeah.
And everything works back from that point. Yeah. Whereas in jiu-jitsu, they just go, well, it's just another day, innit? And it's like, well, no, you need to be good going into this. We want you mentally fresh, physically fresh. Like Dave said, like, we want you going like, class, can't wait to roll, rather than being like, I'm shattered here. Like,
I think it's absolutely something that jiu-jitsu just doesn't do, I don't think. It's like that kind of understanding of the long game kind of thing, and again, periodizing training to kind of peak at certain events, and maintain a peak as well if you have a run of kind of competitions and things. And like you're saying, you don't want to be, if you've got 4 competitions in 4 weeks, you don't want to be amazing at the first competition and by the fourth, shit. It's about being able to maintain that level of kind of peaking or intensity. And again, I find it fascinating. I haven't got to a point that I feel I can really kind of implement it properly yet. And again, I feel the issue is because it's the way the classes are structured, and the way we are at IOG. We're basically fucking part time. We rent mat space. So I don't have the luxury of a facility 24/7. Now, if I did, then it may be easier to kind of implement something like that, and having the way I did it when I tried to kind of periodize it as a group. What I was doing, I did it basically quarterly. So at the end of every quarter, we would have a competition that I wanted to try and get a load of people to do. And then at the beginning of that quarter, we would go through, really work on skill development stuff, little bit of comp stuff, but not much. And the closer we're getting towards the competition, the more we'd have the competition and performance training, and more scenario-based training. So the closer to competition, the more I'm trying to ramp up the kind of representativeness of a competition environment and going from there. But as I say, you can't do it with a group of 40, 50 people who are all competing at different times. And it's just, I don't know why I thought it would work, but
I think to give you to give you some comfort, again, both me and Dave are based do this for a job. Like strength and conditioning is basically detailed planning, and I've yet to meet somebody in combat sports who nails it, and I just don't. I don't think it exists. I think the textbook sort of view of what periodization is, is in the real world just falls to pieces because there is so much context needed.
Yeah, you're like trying to periodize skill acquisition and skill development. It's just
you can't do it.
Such a wide spectrum, and it would have to be on a very specific individual level with people, and it would be finding holes to kind of work on during these kind of skill development phases. But I mean, as a group of people, it's obviously not possible. But individually, I still think there's a way of doing it individually, but it would be the more developed the person is, I think the easier it would be, because it would be easier to identify the areas where there's still potential for growth in their skill set, and as well, it would be the skill development would be driven by potentially opponents that were coming up in the future. So if they had a fight in sort of 3 months' time against a certain opponent, and we identified a disparity in skill where my athlete was at a weakness, that would drive the skill development phase. We need to develop this area of your skill before we start to get closer to the competition, and then it would be really about that skill you've been developing over in the kind of the acquisition or development phase. It would be really working hard to transfer that to a competition environment and a performance environment the closer we kind of get to the competition or the fight. There's got to be a way of doing it efficiently.
I think one of the big problems with periodization from a planning standpoint is, especially in the sport that we do, is there's such a lack of unity in the sport itself that it makes decision making very hard. So as an example of like let's say you've got a guy who's doing a sub only, but then the week after he's doing a tournament. And it's like, well, there's when you're making sort of planning decisions from like we were talking about strength conditioning, there's always a pro and con to everything. So you could say like, right, we're going to do this, but what's that going to come at the cost of losing out or something? And you obviously have to make a decision relative to that person to go, no, we're going to stick with this for now because we don't need to worry too much about that. And that was something that we did last year. Was our first, like we took a team to the British, which was like our first one we'd done as a gym. And obviously we have like one session a week dedicated to more competition based training. And I remember when we were planning the sessions and sort of getting a structure, it was always interesting because you sort of going, there's so much stuff that we could attack here especially when you're looking at a big group standpoint. It's like, it's very difficult. Like you said, on an individual level, you might have a lot more depth, but because of the changing nature of the sport in terms of 1 week they're doing sub-only, 1 week they're doing ACC, 1 week they're doing IBJJF, like it's so hard to create a unified approach to attacking each individual thing because you have to have, and this is again in the strength conditioning world, is more of a view of the more modern approach to periodization, in that there is so much variability in sport. There's so many things that can go right. There's so many things that can go wrong. Having such a long-term view of like, right, this is this phase, this is this phase, this is this phase, especially in combat sports, just isn't as reliable because there's so much variance that can change week to week, from injuries, from how the person feels, how the person doesn't feel, like, and when they're doing the competitions themselves, it's very hard to create this like ideal viewpoint of periodization. Whereas the reality is like, can we create the broadest athlete that we possibly can from a skill standpoint, from a preparation standpoint, and then you can just tweak things, right? You're doing a points match, right? You can't do this, this, and this for the next 3 weeks, whatever it is. Do you know what I mean? Like you can't reap the leg, whatever it is, like fucking terminology you want to use.
Yeah, that's a really important thing as well. Yeah, because that's another thing that would come into the periodization. It would be the rule set. So you'd have to then switch, what they can and can't do, and it's how far out would you switch that? Like with IOG, everyone could do everything. Like, within reason, everyone can do everything. So like white belts can attack leg locks and all kinds of leg locks and stuff. But again, coming up to competition 2-3 weeks out, I've got to be very, very explicit about, okay, these next 2 weeks, you cannot attack a heel hook because it will serve no purpose in that competition. So we need to have everything you do in these next 3 weeks can only be things that you can do at that competition. And again, how often they compete is going to chop and change with who the athlete is and what they can and can't do. And as I say, there's so many different things to kind of keep track of. And one thing I do with my guys is, like, if one of them is able to compete a lot, I do like them to have kind of periods, like down periods, where they've done a lot of competitions and maybe have a few months off. Because usually from that period of competing, a few things have been highlighted. And then we can go into like a post-competition period where then I will focus on that skill acquisition if it needs to be, acquiring kind of skills I don't feel they have, or developing skills that I feel weren't quite there at that point. But it has to be on this kind of individual level. Like we say, it has to be, it's very specific to that individual athlete and their performances and what I've seen with them. And then, running a whole class, and I mean, I will do it every now and then. I have different people doing different stuff in the class, but it's very hard to kind of keep track of that. It's just the nature of the sport. And I mean, let's say as a part-time gym, like the mat time we have is limited anyway. So it's a case of what's the most I can get for the most people in this limited period of time. And I can't just focus in on one or two individual athletes and everyone else just has to go along for the ride, because it's
difficult. And
necessarily.
Go on there, sorry.
It's not. It is, and then at the same time, it's not, because it's not like it's going to harm those other people and their development that certain people in the room have to train with specific constraints, like, no, you can't do this at the moment, or whatever.
It can help,
I think so. To go back to what Andrew was saying about periodization, the sort of classical periodization model is, some people say it's dead, some people are pushing back against that, all sorts of stuff. And yes, traditionally it is easier to periodize for development into a season. The difficult part then becomes of how do you manage it during the season, especially towards the tail end. For us, it's difficult because, unlike MMA, we don't tend to have camps unless we have people competing very specifically for certain competitions in the year and it's all planned out, or they're very specifically competing on sub-onlys and things like that. In MMA, you've usually got 8 to 12 weeks, depending on how lucky you are about when they take fights. And so there's been a bit of a solution from the people who work with MMA fighters that they use quite an agile approach. Again, like Andrew said, where year round you're developing a bit of everything and accepting that there's not going to be many points where you're turning the volume up completely on one aspect. And I think having the same sort of approach is going to be helpful, and sort of seeing it as, trying to see it as a net positive rather than a potential negative, that actually the complexity of it means that we can't really hyper-specify in those ways except on a one-to-one basis, or that we then require that individual to kind of do it themselves and have a bit of forethought and have some aims and intentions for when they go into training that obviously you can remind them of, but you can't design the entire session around them specifically. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. That might be just me being informed by classroom teaching, where they started to set people and make it about the top. The classic example is that the only people who benefit from a setted teaching environment is the smartest kids. Everyone else loses out.
It's the Matthew effect.
Everyone benefits.
Rich get richer, the poor get poorer. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. This is why scouting. This comes into like things like football and stuff like that. Like scouting early. Yeah. Like if you're a late developer, you've got to have a hard time making it, because if you're scouted early, because again you're physiologically like developed quicker, you're going to get the better training, you're going to get the better opportunities and stuff. So it's like, yeah, it's
it's interesting though. I think.
Sorry, I was going to. You talked about like the athlete kind of taking ownership of the training. I think this is a big thing as well. Yeah. And for my best guys are very kind of independent in that sense. They study their own kind of game, and they have things they want to work on. And as I say, I'll have people come in and they want to work on specific things that to their game. I really push that side of it, that kind of like the self-motivated, self-driven training, so they can. I'm not necessarily telling them what to work on. I will if it needs to be, but most of them I really push them to understand what they need to work on for their game and make it kind of individual in that sense.
Yeah, I think that's something. No, it's something we have like we use like performance reviews. So we have like a questionnaire that if they go and compete, we'll send them a questionnaire, and it's sort of like all the questions like how did you fucking feel you performed, all this sort of shit, what went wrong, what went right, all this blah blah blah. And like you said, it has to be led by them. Like we always say, like you're not doing it for us. I'm not. I don't want to sit and read your fucking questionnaire. I want to do it because you want to do it. Like my job's to help you, not just. I can't fill a form in for you. I'm not your mother. Like it's and it has to be individual led, doesn't it? Like obviously from a coach perspective, your job, or I think our job is you're trying to like align them with those things. So if you feel them going off track a little bit, they're getting distracted. So just to remind you, this is what we're working on. This is what happened last time. Just let's just try and stay on the path a little bit, but. It like you said, it has to be them, and they have to understand where they're good, where they're bad, where needs work, what can they do to improve, and that not necessarily that doesn't always mean a technical thing. That might be like I don't know, a psychological thing in terms of
absolutely,
how they're handling the pressure of tournaments or competing as a whole, or their nutrition, their strength conditioning. Like I always think it's really interesting this stuff because, especially for competitors, when you're dealing with normal hobbyist-based trainers, life gets a little bit more complex because obviously they tend to have full-time jobs and they've got families and all this different stuff. But when you've got a competitor who's 20 years old, the answer's usually pretty obvious. I mean, maybe that's just because I'm lucky at it coming from our job. I'm sure Dave is the same thing. I don't know about you, Ed, but like the answers are usually obvious, and it's where are the holes that you have? How can you go and fill them, and how's that going to help you improve your performance? But it's still interesting in this day and age, and maybe it's a jiu-jitsu thing, maybe it's not, but how people lack that awareness when it comes to developing themselves as an athlete.
I think, like you mentioned about the questionnaire, like self-report, I think it's good. I don't know how many people do it, but I find even if, like you say, the coach doesn't go through it with them, I think just like the prompt of them filling that out, and the process of them going through filling this out makes them aware of things they wouldn't have previously kind of thought of. So sometimes even if you don't go through it with them, they'll by the process of going through these questionnaires and self-report, it'll highlight things and make them more aware of certain things they wouldn't have kind of considered. So I think that's underused. That sort of stuff's underused. But again,
it's just information gathering, isn't it? You're just trying to gather information. Because again, I think that one of the best things. I mean, you say a lot of good things. I'll blow smoke with your ass, mate. But one of the best things I ever heard you say was like, there's always a level of information that we as a coach aren't access to. In terms of like cornering, I think it was relative to cornering you were talking about. But that's a fucking. I don't know if we've got time for that over here all fucking day.
It's a real issue for me. That is
I agree. But there's so much information that we're just not accessible to as a coach. We can watch things and we go, oh, it looks like they're doing all right. Whereas in the inside, they're like shitting themselves, or they're doing one thing at a tournament, and you're sort of like, well, why did that happen? And they give you whatever it is. Do you know what I mean? Like, and I think stuff like that is a fantastic way of. Because we all watch training, we can all look at it from a technical framework and go like, they're making this error.
It's all third person though as well. Third person as well. It's like, it's finding ways to draw that information out of them. That's the thing, and again, it's drawing that information out of them, and again, they might. It's trying to get them to not give you the answers that they think you want as well. This is the other thing. It's like then they'll be like, "Did I do it right?" It's like I don't know what right is. Is that that's what you're feeling at the time, or is that what you think I wanted you to be feeling at the time? And that's when it's difficult. And again, the more you build that relationship with your students, and the more you have a good kind of relationship, a bilateral relationship, like a back and forth relationship with them, and it isn't just me dictating to them, and the more confident they are, kind of challenging me and questioning me, the more I feel I'm likely to get honest answers out of them, and the more honest the answer is, the better the quality of information they're giving me to work with. It's like you go into if you're not well and you go to the doctors and you give them as much information as you possibly can. The diagnostics is based on what you fucking tell them. Like, if you're hiding certain symptoms and you're hiding certain things from them, then you're not going to allow them to do the best job they can fucking do. Like, you need to give them as much honest, valid information as you possibly can in order to go through this kind of process of diagnostics. And that's kind of what we're trying to do. We're trying to get that valid information out of them, that the true information, as opposed to information that's kind of biased towards how they feel that, you know, you want them to respond. And it's all a massive psychological fucking minefield, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So,
and I think
it comes back to the right relationship with you and the athlete. You have to have a good relationship with them.
And I think
not an Andre Galval kind of relationship with them.
Yeah,
I mean, a
definitely.
different kind of relationship.
Yeah.
A more legal.
There's that. Do you know what, mate? I mean, not the not the Galval shit, but
have you guys ever been? You guys have been sued before? Because, you know,
no, there's nothing to there's nothing to sue, mate. So they can fucking try.
It's true. He cleared himself. Apparently, he's innocent. So
yeah,
with a load of kids, so it's fine.
Yeah,
that's fine. Yeah. Jimmy Savile opened fucking hospital.
Someone needs to put Jimmy Savile surrounded by children. Going, yeah, it's fine. It's fine. He says it's fine.
It's fine. Look, he's fine.
Yeah.
Kids love him. I'm sure they fucking do. He loves the kids as well. That's the problem.
Allegedly.
Sorry, sorry. Allegedly.
Allegedly.
Fine. We're safe now. We said the word.
Yeah, we're safe. I mean, I'd be surprised if he listens to this. Imagine just like a really niche following is just Andre Galval list. Yeah.
You get cease and desist letter from Andre Galval. It's like, fuck me, Andre Galval listens to our podcast. No, but we have a real legal problem now. I know, but like, we've made it.
Yeah. What was I going to say? Oh, yeah, that was it. Right.
Sorry.
Yeah. Depends where we started.
Back on track. Anyway, sorry.
Fucking hell. Do you know all I'm thinking is? So Libby, obviously, Libby just fought Sarah Galval and Polaris, and
I watched that fight.
And when she lost, I like messaged her and I was just like, my response was, "Don't worry, at least your dad's not a nonce."
Yeah, Sarah was in the same warm-up room I was in. She's good. She's good. But
yeah, she's a fucking sensational grappler. Dad's a wrong one, but she's a fucking brilliant grappler.
Oh, absolutely.
Anyway, so what I was going to say is actually the comment you made brings us right back to the original point in terms of this idea of like what's wrong with ecological dynamics or the constraint-led approach as a whole. And it is one of my things is just the lack of commitment to the other areas of coaching in terms of culture, in terms of psychological management, in terms of all this other stuff that goes into coaching. Like one of my big sort of coaching heroes is a coach called Ivan Cleary, who coaches in the NRL in Australia, and he's quite open that he's not a technical coach. He's a culture. He sets the culture for the team, and he's been the head coach at one of the most I was not without boring you. So his team, the Penrith Panthers, they've been to like 5 Premiership finals in the last 6 years. They've won 4 of them back to back. Like one of the most successful teams in Australian rugby league of all time. And he's quite open about the fact he's not a technical coach; he's a culture coach. And obviously, he's got people underneath him that do the technical coaching, but it opens that lens of like coaching is not always this very one dynamic, right? I write 4 games and then that takes care of everything else. It's a people business, isn't it? And you've got to navigate those people in various different ways based on your personality or whatever your strengths as an individual are.
Yeah,
this is the issue I've had. That like the last podcast I did, the one with Lauren, that was the thing that I kind of ended on. It's the problem is it's focused. Everyone is focused on this very specific technical aspect of the coaching and mechanically how the room should be training and things. And you can have, as I say, you can have really good games. You can tweak them really well and stuff. But if the environment and the culture within that room is not good, and there's problems within that, then you're not going to get the sort of development you could get. You can be doing like a perfect ecological approach and like mechanically and with the games and everything, but the other aspects of it are going to allow that to work so much better than it potentially is working. So it's having an understanding of the culture and the relationships between athletes in the room, and there's so much to that. And again, I believe this kind of fixation on like the constraints-led approach it's narrowed that vision of what a coach is now, and again, did you listen to the lecture thing I gave two and a half years ago, the one at the Ecopalooza? It was on
I did, yeah.
how to coach within an ecological kind of environment stuff, and that's what that really focused on. It wasn't on the technical aspects of the games and things. It was more on how to kind of maximize what's within your room, based on kind of the self-report, the relationships between athletes, and again having the athletes have an understanding of how to get the most out of training in a certain way, mindset, all of this kind of stuff. And again, I always kind of mention like Adam Nichols. This is his kind of area, like the sports psychology side of things, and it can really, you can get more out of the ecological approach or the CLA approach, whatever you want to, buzzword you want to use, if you get those other kind of aspects right. It's almost like there's loads of little things, like a marginal gains thing, but if you're just focusing on one aspect of coaching and one aspect of your room, there are many other things within that room as a coach that you can improve the training with, and not just come up with some clever constraint to add onto a game.
Well, I say this a lot, and obviously this is something that we'll all experience. Obviously, with me and Ed both run gyms. Dave, obviously, you coach classes in another gym, but you've got no control over who walks into your building. So, and I've been in sport a long time, whether it's playing, whether it's strength conditioning, whether it's obviously now jiu-jitsu, but I've played sport my entire life, and I've seen more physically illiterate people trying to do jiu-jitsu than any other sport. And as a gym owner, as a coach, you've got no control whether that person walks into your gym. Like, we all want really good level, high level competitors, but the reality is you might not get that. You're not guaranteed that those kind of people, like, they're highly driven, highly internally motivated. That we're not guaranteed that those people are going to walk into the gym. But it's accepting that part of coaching is that basically doesn't matter. What matters is the people that do walk into the gym, and can the environment be happy, safe? Can it provide them with fulfillment and relationships that they can enjoy, a sense of, what's the word I'm looking for? I can't remember the word, but like control over their own training. There's a posh word that I can't. Autonomy over the training. That's the word I was looking for.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And that's all you, as a coach, that's all you can control, especially in jiu-jitsu, which is obviously an amateur sport. It's not like people are getting recruited and scouted to go train it. I mean, maybe
you're not going to get the top athletes. You're not going to get the top athletes. They're going to go to football. They're going to go to races like that. In America, they're going to go to the NFL, NBA, all stuff like that. You're not going to get the top athletes like coming into jiu-jitsu. Like, the amount we get, so many people, like you say, have this low level of kind of physical literacy. Like, so they've a lot of them come in. It's like, what other sports have you done? And they've never really done anything.
Yeah,
they've never been in not even any team sports, let alone the kind of individual sports and stuff as well. And I think this is where, like, I'm really interested in like the scouting side of things as well, and like the idea of like donor sports for jiu-jitsu and all this kind of stuff. And so this is like, for me, I'm always trying to look for gymnasts if I can. Anyone who's done gymnastics, stuff like that, because their physical literacy is so much higher. The way they have an understanding of their movement and just the amount of movement within gymnastics and the amount of different movement patterns and, you know, types of movement, it gives them much more opportunity to find solutions within jiu-jitsu, because they can move their body in a certain way. Like, that's the thing. And then you get someone who come in who has never done any sport, like, and they haven't moved their body in all these kind of different ways because of a previous sport. Because you can, when someone comes in, they've done a different sport, again, if you understand the other sport, you can have an idea of what certain movement patterns may work quite well for them. Things like wrestlers, stuff like that. Wrestlers are really good, honestly, because it's a combat sport anyway, but like football, basketball, stuff like that. You have an idea of what the action capabilities within those sports kind of are, and if they've played it to quite a high level, you can kind of confidently know that certain movement patterns they're going to be quite well versed in, so you can push them into certain aspects of the game. Whereas, someone coming in who've never done it before, never done anything before, but on the plus side as well, like the bad habits and bad movement patterns, stuff like that, you're not going to necessarily have any of that. But yeah, I mean, what do you teach in school, Dave, by the way?
So I'm not a teacher anymore, but I was a school history teacher for 8 years.
History teacher. Okay, so it's not. I was hoping it'd be PE.
No,
because this idea of like physical literacy within schools is like quite a big thing at the minute, and it's like obviously getting kids through school and getting to do as many different sports as possible. I think that's obviously changed the way it used to be. Hyper specializing in kids really early used to be the way forwards. Whereas now, like, you've got kind of world-class athletes, people like Roger Federer, all these people were multi-sport athletes before they focused on one sport. And the more sports you do as a kid, the more different types of movement and movement patterns you're going to have experienced. So when you do finally decide to kind of specialize in that one sport, you move much better than people because you've had this experience of variability in movement patterns.
And I think it's something that's become more important in the last 20 or 30 years with the rise of sedentarism. You've got, like, 50s and 60s, kids played outside. So they could skip, they could play hopscotch, chase, tag. They had more physical literacy than most people do on average.
Not the case now.
Exactly. And what was
You're not allowed out.
Was,
you're not allowed to play outside.
well, what was
too dangerous.
When I was
Andrew Galval might get you.
I was going to say, you can blame Galval for that.
But one of the problems that they had was there are lots of different sports that they introduced them to, and that's fantastic. But then they also didn't deal with any of the issues of physical literacy. It was almost assumed like, oh, a wide variety of sports will take care of that. And actually, from the S&C perspective, no, it won't. You need to look at what do all of those things do, what exists, what doesn't. You know,
Okay.
The emphasis on track and field, for example, in the 70s and 80s, not a bad thing because there's loads of the different movement patterns covered.
A lot of variability,
assuming you
yeah.
get them to do all of the different sports. And then in, winter you play, I don't know, maybe you play cricket and you play football or rugby, and you've covered quite a lot there. Whereas we often had kids who really struggled because all they'd done is a load of different sports and they didn't really
Well, they're just overgeneralized, aren't they? They've never actually got better at the thing. Like, generalization is great, but you need to develop like all the sort of prerequisite skills. You have to get better at something, don't you? If you play football one week, basketball the next week, cricket the week after, you never actually get enough exposure to the thing to get better at them. And
It's
obviously,
a balancing act, really.
of course it is. Yeah, and realistically, what you probably need is I don't know, like 2 or 3 things. Isn't it? It's like let's take the 2 or 3 things that, like you said, cover the basis of running, of jumping, of rolling, of contact, of balance, of all this different stuff, and you get better at them, so that then you can have you've got a general approach to preparedness, but you've gone through the action of learning skill behavior and a lot of different stuff that you can then go and take into other environments. I think that's more of the case of a generalization standpoint, because like you said, otherwise you just get kids that do a lot of stuff, but they're actually not very fucking good at anything.
Yeah. So it's kind of like, it would be a case of like limiting you almost try and specialize in 3 kind of sports.
Yeah.
Prioritize 3 sports that, again, have very kind of different movement patterns. But then obviously the more sports you do, then the less you're going to actually engage in those individual sports. And yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, because you've got to build the physical attributes and you have to get used to that. Like, let's say you took football, cricket, and rugby as an example. So football, obviously, you've got a lot of the coordination of your feet, being able to separate your upper body, lower body, be able to pass, all that timing, all that different stuff. Obviously, cricket, you've got hand-eye coordination, you've got depth perception, you've got all these different things. Rugby, you've got very much like the physical contact of things. Obviously, within football and rugby, you're covering a lot of distance on your legs. There's loads of physical benefits of impacts of running, whether it's on your growth, all that different stuff, development of tendons, ligaments, all that different shit that kids need. And you're getting a bit of a broader spectrum of different physical qualities of timing, of speed, of awareness, of perception, all this different stuff. And then eventually you've got a kid when they hit like 15, 16 that can put their hand to anything because they've built such a variation of things, but they've actually got progressively better at it. They've not just gone, right, we're going to do this, then we're going to do this, then we're going to do this, then we're going to do this, because they've just never seen that improvement.
No, it makes sense. Yeah.
And you see it, like it's interesting when you talk about like sports that relate well to grappling. And obviously there's certain sports which have a sort of higher positive net return, but it isn't always a guarantee. Like, it always comes back to that. It always comes back to that individual, doesn't it? Like you might get some, like obviously, like I don't know about you, Ed, because obviously you're down south, but we're getting. In the north, you've seen so many ex-professional rugby league players now taking up jiu-jitsu, which is terrible for all of us fucking normal-sized human beings. But
no, we're based very close to Saracens, and I've been trying to pinch off them for a while, but
So you've got obviously they'll be very prepared for the physicality. Though it's obviously it's easy for them, innit? So they're used to moving, they're used to contact, they're used to all this stuff. But it doesn't necessarily guarantee that they're going to take the game really well. Whereas you've got someone like, an example I always think of is like Mark McQueen. I obviously don't know Mark, but I follow his stuff. He's obviously come from a strength background, and you'd look at him and you go, strength background to that level isn't going to be suited to this, because obviously he's massive.
Yeah.
He's good at strength sports. They tend to end up really stiff, really immobile. They're very good at expressing force, but they're not very good at moving. But the individual himself has gone, do you know what? I'm going to take the principles of how I applied myself and apply it into this. And obviously it's produced a fantastic grappler. But you take another individual who might not have had the same success, and it's like, yeah, he'll have a prerequisite of strength, he'll have a prerequisite of physicality. Doesn't guarantee that you're going to get a skilled learner. Just because one person's good at one thing doesn't mean it's always going to equate.
He's a good example, because when I kind of first heard about him and heard about his background and stuff, I kind of assumed he would have a certain style and he would grapple in a certain way. And he the way he's approached training obviously has been he's trying to kind of work on stuff that isn't about being strong and having that kind of strength. And he's developed into a very, very well-rounded grappler. And from his background, I would have assumed that would be quite difficult, because everything would go around the strength-based stuff. But he's obviously very aware of the areas that he can improve that aren't kind of strength-based, and it all fits well together. So I'm massively impressed with his development. Yeah,
significant work ethic as well. Like again, I don't know him, but I've been sat in like warm-up areas where he's been sat with his team, just like fucking earwigging. And they're sort of like, oh, what are you doing after this? And he's like, oh, I'm going to go and lift after this. Do you know what I mean? Like, and he's away from home, found a gym, whatever, in a hotel, whatever. And it's just work ethic in it as well. It's like, that's the thing you want, really. It's not necessarily, obviously physical requisites matter.
But that's one thing. But then the psychological side of it's the motivation. It's kind of the emotional side, all this kind of stuff. Like, you could have physically like the perfect kind of specimen, but they may have kind of the mental aspects of it, all this kind of side of the psychological aspect of it could prevent them from getting the most out of what they have physically. So whereas you could have someone who maybe isn't as kind of physically gifted as someone else, but the kind of the emotional intelligence side of it, the psychological side of it, allows them to develop at a faster rate. So, and maximize what they've kind of physically been given. And you just can't account for that. And as I say, I've kind of given up on predicting who's going to be good and bad at my place, because I get it so wildly wrong. Someone will come in after the first few weeks like they've got potential, and other people will come in and they literally have no coordination, and then 5-6 years down the line, that's not turned out the way I expected it.
So, and you're also obviously juggling with lifestyle stuff as well, aren't you? Like you like, I was one of the best grapplers I used to train, one of the best grapplers that I ever experienced. Like now, no longer trains, and he was fucking unbelievable. Like, as a white belt, like early blue belt, he was just like running through people. Like, and this was back in the days when like belts meant a bit more, because that was your relative level. But like, and now he's not interested. I think he's in the army. Like, he's not. And it's
but that's it. As a coach, you've got to kind of manage that motivation. And it can be a case of the motivation can drop for many reasons. A lot of it is like managing expectation and all this kind of stuff. So that psychological side of it is you have to really kind of understand the athlete as a person to kind of understand how to help with the motivation if it dips, and what will work, what won't work. And sometimes it can be a case of their expectations are too high, the expectations are too low, and it's trying to help manage that. And like goal setting and all this kind of stuff can be really, really important with certain people, and it can be the difference between them, sticking with it and not sticking with it. But then it could be a case that there could be massive life events around that person that is going to influence. And so I've had a lot of students where their training has suffered over a period of time and they've plateaued, and I found out later down the line that it kind of coincided with like a massive event in their life, like a death or a divorce or something like that. And it's not knowing that as a coach, but it's hard to kind of get that out of students unless you have that kind of relationship with them, because these are huge kind of factors within their life that are going to affect their kind of attendance and their motivation to come in and all these kind of things.
Yeah, it is.
Again,
It is interesting.
Coach, counselor, whatever. Like you have to wear a lot of kind of hats, as it were, and they're all interlinked as well. This is the thing; they're not kind of isolated kind of aspects. They're all kind of, it's complex. They're all influence each other in random ways, and that's the easiest way. It depends, or it's complex is the two most used answers that I give now. So,
but I think that's something that I think, being S&C coaches as well, you see, and having been a classroom teacher, you see, like, you cannot just be the technical model person, no matter which technical model it is, because ultimately it's a human being in front of you with thoughts, dreams, a life, interpersonal relationships, ups and downs. So we've sort of said before that there are definitely some people out there plug and playing with CLA to cover up for the fact that they're a shit coach. They don't have any technical understanding, and they're a phenomenal coach and they have loads of technical understanding, and they're a complete dipshit. And it's the problem being that if you cannot communicate with other people and listen to them and care about their lives, you can't coach them.
Yeah.
And unless you create an environment where you filter all of those people out and only invite a certain type of person to your gym by not telling them where the front door is and that sort of stuff.
Oh, are you going down the Andre Galvao thing again? Or is that?
I don't know. I don't know what he call it.
Yeah. Anyway, but no, I think you have to, like, again, as a coach. I think a lot of people get into coaching because they want to kind of have that authority, and they want to be the main guy, and they want everyone to look up to them. And if you want to be a good coach, you have to give a shit about the individual students and care about getting them to progress. And it has to be more about them than it is about you. And I still believe a lot of people get into coaching because they like the kind of the respect and the authority and being this role model that everyone looks up to and stuff. And they don't really care about the students. They just kind of want to develop this kind of cult of personality around themselves. I think that's a big issue. But to be honest as well, I don't even think they realise that themselves. I think they lack the self-awareness to understand what their job really is as a coach, and what they probably think what they're doing is a great job, and because people are really respectful to them and they say really nice things about them, and they can't kind of introspect enough to see that it's not necessarily a good thing.
And that's the example that's often been set for them. They're just replicating. That's what my coach was like, so I'm just going to emulate.
Yeah. I like to think, because I've been doing it quite a while, and I have a lot of people now kind of coaching under me, sort of thing. A lot of my students are now coaching other clubs and stuff, and I'd like to think the environment we have and the culture we have has created some. I think they're really good coaches, but again, I'm biased. But they run the kind of the gyms and the classes in a very, very similar way. It's very open. There's very little hierarchy. There's always very good back and forth dialogue, and these are kind of the key things that I try and push across for someone to be a coach. I think it's more important than people realise. It's more important than having an encyclopedic knowledge of all the technical side of it.
No, I'd agree.
I'm gonna have
right.
To
I was going to say I'm going to have to leave as well because I've got a job to get to. But appreciate your time, Ed. If anyone listening to this wants to find you, not that you like being found.
Depends if it's Andre Galvao or not.
Yeah.
Probably a bit too old for him anyway.
Yeah. Where's best for people to find you?
Oh, fucking, I don't know. Instagram is probably the one thing that I will occasionally look at. If you're lucky, I may get back to you. Maybe not. Party Bear BJJ, I think, is my Instagram handle.
Nice.
Institute of Grappling on Instagram. Our website's down at the minute, so that's probably the best place. Instagram is probably the best place for both. Drop a message to me, or if you drop a message to the IOG Instagram, you're more likely to get a response, because it's not usually me doing that page, and the people that do it actually reply to people. So the message may get through to me, and they'll probably force me to reply. So that might be the best route to go down.
And either that, even if you don't reply, they'll just get videos of you getting jump scared by your students in shops.
You see that? I got sexually assaulted, and you see the one I posted the other day? I was just walking on the phone, and then someone came behind me and tried to stick their finger up my ass. I took
allegedly.
So like the other night as well, this is the sort of thing that happens in my gym. The other night, so the same guy that tried to oil check me in public was just sat on the side, just on his phone. And when people are on the phone, I like to kind of walk past and then nonchalantly just try and kick the phone out of the hand because I find it really funny. I did that, and he chased after me and he tried to like keg me and like pull my trousers down, but he pulled my trousers down and my pants. I fell over and I'm literally just, my dick is out in the middle of the training room and everyone's like pissing themselves and like I get zero respect. He literally pulled my pants down. And again, what we were doing for, everyone wasn't working. We were doing like takedown kind of rounds. So half the class were just sat at the side and I fell right in front of them. How would you deal with that? What would you, if that happens to you, what would you do?
We've fortunately, because we get a lot of women, we've got quite a good safeguarding policy in place, so that would not go down well.
We did have a couple of women training as well, but they were rolling at the time, thankfully.
Oh, yeah, thankfully.
It's, yeah, I mean, I'm starting, it's sounding more like a Galval.
We have to be,
isn't it?
we have to be, we have to be careful. Yeah, I was going to say, it sounds more like a rugby team. Anyway, with that note,
brilliant.
Thank you. Thank you, Ed. Appreciate your time, mate. Enjoy the rest of your day, boys.
Thank you.
Take it easy.
Thanks a lot, guys. Bye.
Bye.